It's 5:30, so we're going to call this meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission to order. We're going to first welcome all the guests we have here tonight. We're going to start with our usual roll call. Kelly, you want to kick us off?
Kelly Toon here.
Kenneth Howell here.
Larry Stone here.
Ken Halliday here. And then we're going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just for those who aren't here all the time, we have a few things we've got to do housekeeping wise. Next item is in the packet that everyone received was a copy of the agenda for today, and I'm looking for any edits to that or a motion to approve.
I'll do a motion to approve.
I can second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Agenda's approved. Next item is approval of minutes from last meeting. Again, that was in the packet. Everybody had a chance to take a look at it. Any edits? Otherwise, I'm looking for approval, a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved to approve the minutes, May 21, 2024.
Second that approval.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. So the minutes are approved. Our next item is any declaration of conflicts of interest relating to what we're going to discuss today. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. We also, at this time, allow any comments from public as it relates to items that are not on the agenda. So if there's any other comments unrelated to the agenda, now is a good time to stand up and let us hear them. Do we have anybody on Zoom?
No one on Zoom.
Okay, great. Today we don't have any special presentations, correct?
That's correct.
And so we'll be down to number 8, which is our business item, which is our only item for today. And we're here to make a recommendation to town council to either approve with conditions or deny the ordinance to add 478 to the town's historic register. And with that, I'll turn it over to Madison to give a little opening statement, and then we'll move through the process.
Okay, so hopefully you all have all read my staff report as presented in the packet. This is a nomination application submitted by Ms. Tracy Anderson under 2 different criteria. 1, distinctive characteristics of a type, period, method of construction or artisan, and a subset of that criteria is exemplifies specific elements of an architectural style or period and represents a style that is particular to the town. And 2, geographic importance, and again, a subset of that criteria enhances the sense of identity of the town or community. So as laid out in my staff report, addressing criteria 1 from the nomination application, the property is a rustic wood home near the Eagle River in Minturn. This single-family 2-bedroom home was built in 1943, making it eligible for historic preservation. It personifies the essence of historic Minturn. Its appearance is largely the same as when it was originally constructed 80 years ago. It underwent improvements in 1949, which is still at the 75-year threshold, which do not impact its exterior appearance. The primary building material is log, which was a relatively common building mainstay at the time of construction. Log house historically denotes a more permanent hewn log dwelling, either 1 or 2 stories of more complex design, often built as a second-generation replacement. Many of the earliest 18th and 19th and early 19th century log houses were traditionally clad sooner or later with wood siding or stucco. And this is from Baumberger, which was cited in the staff report. This log house is untraditional in regards to the established Rocky Mountain cabin. In a quote from Baumberger, while the entrance doorway to most earlier log houses was generally placed beneath the eaves, as a means of adapting to the greater snowfall in the Rockies, here the entrance was placed in the gable end and sometimes protected from roof slides by a porch supported by 2 corner posts created by an extension of the roof beyond the gable wall. The entrance to this log house is not on the gable end, nor is it protected by the porch, which makes it an unusual example of a log cabin or log structure built in the Rocky Mountains. Addressing criteria number 2, geographic importance. Again, from the nomination application, this particular home was built in 1942, just as the war was getting underway. That year, Camp Hale was constructed as a, sorry, I lost my place. That year, Camp Hale was constructed as a temporary training camp for 10th Mountain Division. The highway over to Battle Mountain had been completed 6 years prior to this. The mine in Gilman was operating at close to full capacity and was an important part of Minturn's history as an authentic working town. The railroad played a key role in the town's economic development as well during this time frame. Given the continual teardown of Minturn's historic homes and other historic structures, the preservation of this property serves to encapsulate a sliver of the town's history and can serve as a reminder to those who visit the town of its amazing history. Minturn is a tourist town, and visitors who travel to see it, especially in the summer and fall months, will be rewarded to see this house on their walking tour. Visitation to Minturn is projected to increase this summer and beyond due to the recent designation of Camp Hale as a national monument, which is roughly 15 miles north on Highway 24. So that was from the nomination application, and staff's comment based on the criteria 2. Log structures, both historic and not, can be seen all over the state of Colorado, and indeed in many states. 478 Eagle River Street is a lot that is adjacent to the river, but can also be viewed from Main Street as you walk by. The structure is a familiar sight to any locals who have lived in or frequented Minturn. So that is a summary of my staff report as presented to you, and I am certainly available for any questions.
Any questions? Do you have anything else you wanted to cover
Do not.
as it relates to the record or anything
That will happen in public comment.
later? Okay, great. Okay, and now is the time if actually this is the time that we usually would have the person who nominated the structure speak, but Tracy is not here, so we'll skip that. And we will go to the property owner and invite the property owner to address the commission.
Thank you, Kim.
Yep.
I'm David Ford, owner of 478 Eagle River Street with my wife, Lily. And my wife, Lily, and I have cherished the eclectic charm and close-knit community of Minturn over the past 3 years, which is why we chose to make it our home. We were particularly drawn to 478 Eagle River Street because of its potential and the opportunity it presents for creating a home that both we and the community can be proud of. I've been coming to Minturn for almost 10 years personally, dreaming of buying a house on the river to share with family and friends, and eventually pass down our kids. As a man of faith, 2 years ago, I wrote down on a piece of paper, lot in Minturn, and I placed it in what I call a God box, which is a place that I put my dreams, intentions, and prayers for others. When 478 Eagle River Street became available, we jumped on it. Excuse me. This has been a little taxing on us, as I'm sure y'all can imagine. Although we knew there was a process involved in getting a demo permit, we never anticipated that the dilapidated structure would be nominated for historic designation. We understand the importance of preserving Minturn's historical character, and it is with this respect that we address you today. Our intention is to replace the existing neglected structure with a new home that aligns with the aesthetic and the spirit of our town. While we have provided a detailed letter outlining our plans, we wanted to personally convey our thoughts tonight. The current building is in a state of severe disrepair. Over the years, it has become a patchwork of unpermitted add-ons from the 70s and the 80s, which, in our opinion, has compromised its historical integrity, and according to the inspection report, the structural integrity. According to the inspection report, the house is unsafe with serious issues such as structural weaknesses, mold, and asbestos. These are not just cosmetic flaws, but hazards that threaten the safety and well-being of anyone who enters the property as well as our neighbors. It is also important to note that we feel the structure does not meet the criteria for historic designation. The HPC's regulations specify that a building must be at least 75 years old to be considered historic. And this one, in our opinion, does not qualify because of all of the additions over time. It has essentially made the building much newer. Moreover, the original structure has been so extensively altered that any historical value it may have had is no longer recognizable. When we purchased the property, the previous owner did not consider it historic either, as it was listed on MLS as a teardown. And I quote, "The house needs to be scraped. The potential is the lot on the river." The nominator has classified the property as a rustic log home. And Madison, if I understood your report correctly, staff had characterized the log structure as untraditional in relation to the Rocky Mountain cabin style. I didn't know if that was from Baumberger or from you. Okay. In contrast, truly rustic structures like the Tegawan Community House on Notch Mountain maintain their historical integrity and serve as genuine representations of our heritage. 478 Eagle River Street does not. Furthermore, the existing house has long been an eyesore, detracting from the beauty of our town. Our neighbors share our enthusiasm for the proposed new home. They too recognize that the current structure does not enhance the community and that the town deserves better. We acknowledge the town's concerns about new constructions and their impact on our community's character. However, preserving a non-historic deteriorating building is not the solution. Our goal is to build a home that respects and complements the community, something that both we and our neighbors can take pride in. In conclusion, we respectfully request that you recommend against designating our home as a historic property. Doing so would allow us to proceed with our plans to replace the unsafe structure with a new home that will contribute positively to the fabric of Minturn. Thank you for your time and consideration. Billy and David Ford.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions anyone has for David before we move on to public comment?
I've got a couple questions. Not sure if he would know the answer or not, but possibly. Is this residence currently being lived in? Is there someone in it?
No.
What, could you step up to them?
Yes.
Give your answer. Thank you. And when was the last time it was lived in?
I have no idea. I don't know. What's that? Yeah, I'm not, the previous owner, I believe, had a tenant in there.
So someone's been living in there, right? That's prior to your ownership, you're saying that?
Yes, my understanding is someone had lived in there, yes.
Yeah, so I guess the thing I'm a little confused on is like, certainly appreciate what you bring to the table and what you're sharing, that this hasn't been condemned based on what you're saying, like.
I actually kind of know the answer, so.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
I was good friends with the previous owner that happened to pass away last year, who had lived in the building for longer than I've lived here. And his tenant he rented to also that has probably been in that building for 25, 30 years that I've known the tenant, and he's still in the valley and has another home elsewhere. But when the old owner passed away, and the property was sold, he was kind of forced to move out because of the tenant or his landlord dying. And so I think Chris Waiter,
I don't know Chris.
or he's had contact with
I
you?
spoke to Chris on the phone, and he is the one that told me that the additions to the house were made in the 70s and the 80s.
And I did ask him, Chris, to be here at the meeting, but I didn't get a response today.
Yeah.
I've I've known him for 25 years and one of the nicest guys you ever met. And he did try to buy the house, but got outbid basically. And, but I think he was saying he would love to live there, or help you out, or, if it doesn't get torn down, he loved living there, is about all I know. And, Mike that lived there, ironically, he's the one that kind of introduced everyone to Keycocker and Belize, because he spent half the year down there for the winters, and his summer was in Minturn. And he was an eclectic, super nice artist guy. Basically kind of, Larry just went there, but we call Belize Minturn South because it has kind of the same feel as here. And he was the first person I know that ever started going down there. But they're both super nice people, but not the best in maintenance and upkeep, as we all know. But they didn't mind living there.
I think for my line of questioning, I think that's the concern I have is like if there were unlivable situation with the property, like that doesn't seem to have been addressed or brought to light. And I'm kind of very interested in that in terms of the property was transferred under that same pretense as well. And guess what? It's right by the river. And if you're talking about asbestos and beginning to make work to, remove and tap into that, that's for me a very serious concern. And I know what's capable and what's not capable of being done there. And if it were a condemnable situation, for me, it makes it a lot easier. And I think that's been my concern as we go into these situations is, what are we learning about these units now that shouldn't have already been known? You obviously, did you know this purchasing that there was asbestos on the property, and was that a part of what was brought to light, or is this just now that we know about it? Like, these are the things that I'm just really curious about in terms of how we make the best decision, as what I know to be what we've been brought in is not just to decide the yes or no, but really to make a concerted effort to not be tearing down properties. That's what I came into this under. That's what the whole catalyst of the creation of this, to my understanding, was. So for me, it's like, if it's condemnable, it makes complete sense, and there's got to be a very calculated effort to figure that out and get that clean. But if it's not, then it's a suitable living place, and it does, for me, start to look at meeting the criteria of that age. And I know how you've broken it down, but for me, that speaks to Minturn. So I just wanted to share that.
I'm sorry, what speaks to Minturn?
The fact that there is, additions that have been made to older properties doesn't make it less old. Like, it's not, it is a property from the origin of when it's been built. That's how I perceive it. I'm not speaking for anyone but myself.
So Kenneth, have you been in the property before?
I have not.
I'm happy to give you a tour of the property. And I think once you are inside that property, you might have a different perspective of the property.
Well, I mean, I think, yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
And the other thing is, I've never purchased a home and had to go through hearings in determining if my home was historic or not. So this is all new to me. And Kenneth, I will tell you that I wish no human being on the planet would ever have to go through this experience. It is a horrendous experience when purchasing a piece of property and not knowing if we are going to be able to do what we want with the property because of an entity, a government body, whatever you may want to call it. It's been very stressful. My understanding is that we're trying to determine if the house is historic, not, condemnable. And again, I would just encourage you to come take a look at the building and see if that is a place you would want to live. Because it's scary and it's eerie and it's depressing and it smells. And I'm not comfortable living there or having any one of my family members live there. Cadence, my stepdaughter, is living up here in the summer and she can't live there. We're not okay with that. She's staying at the Christie. Why would I put someone I love in a building with mold and asbestos and structure issues? I'm just not going to do that. And so when we bought this house and we looked at this house, my first thought was, there is no way anyone could consider this historic. Now, I know beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I understand that and I respect that and I appreciate that. But I just think that having you go on the property and walk it perhaps may change your perspective, is all on that.
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
I would like to comment on the concept of whether the house is condemnable or not, and whether someone is living there or not does not necessarily weigh to that factor. I purchased a home that was condemned, and I had to do some work to bring it up to par, but it was condemned because of, for other reasons. It was a police officer that went and had it condemned because he was in disagreement with the landowner. That's not relevant to this conversation, but what is relevant is that in a community where housing is very tight, we have seen many people living in structures that should be condemned. And I think it's a hazard and a danger to have structures like that. And I agree with you, those things should be identified. So just wanted to comment on that. The second thing I wanted to comment on is that in my perception, the character of this town is not about the structures, but it's about the character of the people who live here. And I very much welcome you to town.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've been coming up here for 10 years with a friend of mine, and this is heaven on earth for me and my family. And what makes this place special is obviously where it is located and its natural beauty and the river. But to Larry's point, the people here we love, because people here are real and they're genuine and they're authentic and they are funky and they are eclectic and they are different. And we love that. And that's why we want to be in Minturn. We don't want to be in Edwards. We don't want to be in Avon. We don't want to be in Vale. And we don't want to build a house that is anything but tasteful and modest. We want to be good stewards of the land and this property. And we want to, show that with a very tasteful structure that the town and the community will truly be proud of. And Kenneth, again, we are looking for something that we are hardworking, honest, humble people. And we're looking to build something that, represents that.
And just to kind of follow up, and if it felt like an attack or a direction at you, I think more of my frustration is that this is even sitting in front of us. And when I talk about it needing to be condemned, potentially based on what I'm hearing, that seems to be through which this should be resolved. like if it's not a viable structure, it shouldn't be sitting in front of us to begin with. And we're not the deciding body. That's also another part that I think is very clear. Like we make a recommendation to planning and zoning. It goes further on to the, you know, from that in the process. So that's not within us to decide that or not. So my point being is that I don't believe that this is the avenue that you should be having to address this. That would have been how I would have thought this would have been directed to you to be addressed. But obviously a nomination was put out that we're not even hearing from the nominee exactly what more than what's in there. And I'm certainly, you know, I don't think I want to go check out, you know, the space if it's not inhabitable and, you know, potentially dangerous. I mean, I take anybody's word for that. So I do appreciate you sharing all that. So that's just where I land with it, is that we can't, I can in my right mind make a suggestion that we should preserve something that wouldn't be deemed to be preservable, right? If it's not livable, if it's not a structure that can withstand, right? Like we have non-living structures, but we've got a water tower, we've got other things that may come up that aren't, you know, particularly things that people live in that may have historic significance. So, but being that it is a home, as is shared, we know that that's at a premium now. There's not a lot of spaces there. But I do respect, you know, the assessment of it. I think that's just where it's odd for me, is that we're sitting here talking about something that I think that would have been from the get-go maybe what I would have thought would have been the move.
I appreciate you clarifying that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, to address
or
Kenneth,
comments?
you know, it's not really us. We could go on a whole nother tangent and discuss condemnability of houses. And currently there's probably dozens that I could probably deem condemnable in this town, but town laws, you know, says if you're living in it and you're not touching it, and you're pretty much, you're able to live in it, whatever living condition you want, and that's just the law. But once you start playing around with the house, then it becomes under the eye of the town, and that's when stuff becomes condemnable, which is always ironic to me, because if someone starts trying to improve and fix upon it, you should be encouraging that. So people tend to not do anything to their house because they don't want to trigger something from the town. So it ends up in a condition like this, which deferred maintenance, which this is a prime example of. I do rebuilding of houses in this town for the last 25 years. And I work a lot with Michael, and we've fixed up a lot of the houses that were in better shape than this one. So just because there's a little bit of mold from the shower doesn't mean it's condemnable. Because there's asbestos, I'd say half the buildings in this town have asbestos, but as long as you're not disturbing it, it's fine. I used to be on the fire department, and I've talked with the fire chief of Vail and about that, and about demolishing buildings with asbestos. And it's, as long as you're not doing it for a living, and you're not, you know, if you're doing it for a living and not taking precautions, then it will be bad for your health. But if it's contained and not being disturbed, it's really nothing to be frightened of. You should be more frightened of the mountain lions around here, or the traffic conditions on Main Street, if you are concerned about life safety issues. And no one that I know of has ever died from mold up here in the mountains, because it's very small. And almost anyone that doesn't maintain the area around their shower has probably some mold in it. But we're not Louisiana with 90% humidity and raging throughout the house. So I do say things can be fixed up, but is it appropriate to fix it up, and is it price appropriate to fix up, and is then whole other
Thank you.
discussion that we'll discuss later.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay, now we're gonna, thank you. You can sit down. Thank you, David. So now we've got some guests here. I don't know if anybody would like to speak, but now's the time for public comment. If anybody would like to get up and make comment. If you just state your name for the record and your address.
Hi, my name's Andy Janis, and as it was stated earlier, I'm David's neighbor. Next to his house is it was once the barn long ago, and it's been a rental ever since 1957. So we are neighbors. So something that hasn't been mentioned this evening is I would like to know, what is the parameter? What does David have to save of this house? Does he just have to save the log walls? Can he tear the rest of it down? So no one stated the parameter to what the parameter is to the Historical Society. See, because all these houses have been gutted and done over, so a lot of what was historical, like in my great-grandmother's time and my grandfather's time, has long left the house. You know, you're looking at age, and God bless Mike McBurney. It was Mike McBurney's mansion, and the rest of us are looking at it going, oh my God, this is a wreck. But I was just wondering, what is the parameter that he would have to follow? Nobody stated that. Does he just have to keep the 2 outside walls? What does David have to do?
We'll take note of the questions and we'll answer the questions after public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy.
I
Thank you.
appreciate you all.
Yes. Anyone else? Thank you again. If you could state your name and address.
Jay Meckling, 654 Main Street.
Welcome.
I've had the pleasure of touring that property, and it would be great if y'all did before you voted on this. Okay. I'm a real fan of history and old structures, and my thought when this came up was, wow, if someone could wave a magic wand and lift this thing up, and she mentioned Camp Hale, and move that thing out to Camp Hale and spend a couple $1 million and fix this thing up, it would be great to tour that place. It would be wonderful, and it would be in the proper time period out there. But no one's going to wave a magic wand and spend $2 or $3 million to carry it out there and fix it up. David used the word dilapidated. The term rustic came up in the report. David used dilapidated, and I'm not the smartest guy, so I looked up dilapidated. The definition is having fallen into a state of disrepair or deterioration as through neglect, broken down and shabby, decayed, fallen into partial ruin, injured by bad usage or neglect. So that, with a couple of exclamation points, really describes that property, I think. And then lastly, just a personal comment. If he had purchased something that was historic, and this could have come up for the past 3 or 4 or 5 years, someone goes, that's a historic building, and he bought something that was historic, and then you can't change it once you or you would know he would have known going in it was historic. Seems kind of maybe targeted that it came in after the fact and after he purchased that, and it didn't come up prior to someone purchasing that house. And that's just a personal comment on that. But thank you all for listening, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name's Michael Pukas. I'm an architect. In full disclosure, I've been talking with David for the past several months. We have not engaged into any agreement to work together. That's kind of pending the outcome of this hearing in town council. So I'm speaking on behalf of David and also my personal opinion. My address is P.O. Box 288, Gypsum, Colorado 81637. Again, I'm an architect, and I've had my own practice since 2003, and I've done a lot of projects here in Minturn, renovations and new construction. And as Kelly has mentioned earlier, we've done a number of projects together. In my opinion, if we look at just the historic value of the property and put aside the state of the overall property being dilapidated. In my opinion, the only part of the structure that would fall under the possible designation of historic would be the original log structure, if it even is true log structure, or if it's split log siding. I would kind of guess it's true log structure, but without cutting holes in the wall, it's kind of hard to know. But the rest of the structure has been undocumented. There have been many additions put on. All of those have been undocumented. I've checked with the town, I've checked with the county, with the county's assessor's office, the planning department, the building department. Nobody has any record of any building permits being pulled for that structure, for any of the additions that were done. In my opinion, it's very unlikely that any building professionals were involved in the design and construction of any of those add-ons or additions. So no architects, no engineers, no professional general contractors, no professional subcontractors such as electricians and plumbing. So there's no particular style other than maybe the original log structure, which there's only two walls that are still visible. The west wall, which faces Eagle River Street, and the north wall, which goes towards I-70. Those are the only two walls of that structure that are still visible that may have any historical significance. The rest of it, as David had mentioned, had been built in the 70s and 80s, and Madison mentioned that there was something constructed afterwards in 49, which still falls under that 75-year window for historic nomination. So I think, I'm sorry I didn't get your name, but I think Andy raised a great point. What part of that structure can be considered as historic and worth preserving? I don't, without taking actual measurements and getting real numbers to make an accurate percentage, I would guess that a quarter of that structure is original. That would fall under the timeline for being considered historic. The rest of it was built afterwards. And where does the town have a definition or some sort of regulation for those additions that were built after the 75-year time frame? So I don't see that any of those additions have any historic or design significance. They were haphazardly done with no design or construction professionals involved. And as far as condemnable goes, I'm not sure the actual process for having a building condemned, whether that's at town, state, federal level, but it is by current living standards subpar. Even though someone may have been living in that for the last 25 to 30 years in its current state up until the unfortunate passing away of that owner, by today's standards, I think would be a stretch that anyone will want to move in and live in it in its current state. Now, when we get into the bigger picture about this historic nomination, the town does have provisions for the demolition of historic properties. And there's a number of criteria that have to be met that I've reviewed with Madison and I've read through thoroughly. And without getting into it, I believe that this structure would qualify for being demoed under the town's guidelines for demoing a historic property. But if this property is nominated as historic and goes through the town council and gets designated as historic, then we are going to have to go through a further longer, drawn out, more expensive process to address all of those criteria to get the project demoed. So even if it is designated as historic, it doesn't mean that it has to stay there and we have to renovate it and make it into something special. It's still going to be possible to demo that project. It's just going, or that property, it's just going to be another longer drawn out process.
Thank you, Michael. Before you leave, are there any questions for Michael? Oh, no, sorry. Thank you. Can't ask questions of the public. Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, anybody else? Do we have anybody online?
Anyone online who would like to speak, please raise your hand. It should be a button at the bottom of your screen. Otherwise, it will be understood that you do not.
Oh, you, okay. All
Okay,
right.
I have no raised hands.
All right, well, let's proceed then. So now we'll get into discussion with the commissioners and
I apologize. I do have the
now you.
email to be
Okay,
read into
all
the
right.
record as
Let's
part
do
of
that
public
first.
comment.
Great.
So this is an email that I received earlier today from the property owner. It was forwarded from the property owners. And so I will be reading their email and then the email that was forwarded. Good afternoon. I hope this email finds you well. We come to you with a heavy heart, as I'm sure you could imagine. We debated about sharing the following email with you since we received it back in May, but we feel like it is in our best interest to include it. We understand if it is too late to include in tonight's report, but we would like it noted. So that was the email from the property owners, and this is the email that was forwarded, which is from Ms. Tracy Anderson. Hi, David. I'm sorry. I can imagine that would be sad. I appreciate your email and your acceptance of the process. Minturn is becoming a very different place since what it was, even since I moved here in 2005. Since the dawn of the Trump tax cuts in 2017, many ultra-rich people have been moving here and buying up the homes, tearing them down, and building huge monstrosities. The residents rose up and basically demanded that the town do something to protect and preserve what was left so as to maintain a small semblance of the old historic character. There is a process and a nomination, does not really mean anything other than a deeper look into things. I believe the town planner will be in touch with you and fill you in. Happy pre-wedding, that is exciting. Is it going to be in Minturn? The rest were pleasantries. But that is the comment that I received.
Okay, thank you. Anything else to go in? Okay, now we can move on to discussion. And so open it up. Any comments? I would just,
Yeah.
before we get into this discussion, this is a learning process for us too, by the way. And we've had very limited, so far, everything that we've been involved in has been pretty clear. So anyway, just let's have a discussion.
So Kelly Toon. Yeah, I tend to play devil's advocate, so just because I say anything doesn't mean I'm picking a side. But I do agree with Michael's analysis of the property a lot. And I'm also trained as an architect from Cal Poly and have been here for 30 some odd years and rebuilt houses. So I see both sides of it. And we are a town that we hate authority, ironically, and we don't like being told what to do. But we also live here in a fabulous time. And as one neighbor put it, we're very blessed to be in Minturn. We have indoor plumbing, and the rich assholes have not moved in yet. And he's one of my oldest friends. And during the 80s, I have people that have visited Minturn, or they're from Vail and visited Minturn in the 80s, and they said it was just a hellhole and dangerous to come here. And they were scared to even visit Minturn because it was such a rough and tumble town, which I find a little hard to believe, but Andy might know better.
I didn't think it was bad.
But from an outsider's viewpoint, I've been literally told that Minturn was such a scary place they would never take children there, and to avoid it at all costs when visiting Vail. I'd also like to say that Michael and Chris that have lived in the house were some of the people that made this town what it is. And hopefully you guys are just as nice. And that's what I just pray for, because it is the people. And in a way, it's a setting. Minturn is a setting. We're different from the rest of the valley. But once we start tearing down every single house, and every single house becomes a vacation house, which I am guilty because I work on a lot of them. And luckily, most of the homeowners are fabulous people. But it does change the economy of the neighborhood. And I've lived here for 20 years, Red Cliff before that. And everyone used to say hi to each other, and now everyone's on their computer or cell phone and headphones, and when you say hi to people, they don't respond to you anymore, except for old friends that you know, which is now down to a small percentage. But back to the house, I do believe the original part of the house was a log house and dates back. And I'm the one that pushed for it to be a 75-year and not a 50-year designation, because I just thought that a lot of the stuff that was built later on was just absolute crap. But that's kind of, it also represents who we are. Minturn was the poorest town in our community. This is where the workers lived. Ironically, Red Cliff was where the rich people lived up until the mine closed. So in a way, Tracy is right in a way that it's a perfect representation of who we are as a people, because we are just a town made out of railroad workers who were deemed the bottom at the barrel compared to the miners. And they were really rough in a way too. And our town never burned down like a lot of the other historic mining towns in Colorado. So we were never rebuilt out of brick and mortar to be fireproofed and with a little bit more money and pizzazz. And even Red Cliff, part of it burned, but we were lucky to avoid it since we're so moist up here, I think. And it actually represents, even though outsiders think we are just, a slum in a lot of ways, it actually is a very close representation of railroad and mining life from the 1880s up to the 1850s that's left in Colorado, which is kind of an interesting fact. And so part of this board is to help kind of preserve the awareness of that, just so you guys know. And we are fairly new, and our town is just a bunch of gray area. So to Michael's question, like what is it a percentage? We left that ambiguous, just like a lot of other things in town, just because there is so much ambiguity to this, and every case is different. And we're learning and amending as we go along this whole process. So we're also in a learning curve, and we're learning as we're going. And it's just because of how difficult some of these properties are. A lot of them aren't built on the property lines. Most of them were just built with random stuff left over from the mine. But it also, in that note, gives it character. And I've been discussing this with random people and neighbors, old and new. And someone mentioned that it was a hodgepodge of design. And it came to mind the house that Michael designed next door, the blue one. 482. And I just met the owners this weekend when they were passing my alley and just said hi. And they were commenting on my property, which is very unusual. But they were taking photos of it, and we had struck up a conversation. But in the randomness of the additions, it, I think, led to what you designed next door, in that there's a randomness in building materials that breaks up the bulk of a big box and was done on purpose to make it interesting. So, I never discussed that design of the house with you, but I do believe you did it to represent some of the randomness of years and years of adding on, which makes some of our buildings unique, and it's not like the rest of the valley. And people do like that eclecticity, I guess. And so, ironically, I think because of it, it led to it inspiring the house next door. Whether you like the style or not, I'm not sure. But that's up to the beholder. And that's one thing I learned in school, was that it's design is all an opinion. There's no right answers. There's right answers to engineering, but I guess Jay lives in the Enclave. When I moved here 20 years ago, it was voted the ugliest building in town. Even though it's brand new. But it didn't represent what Minturn was about. And so we had a vote, and places like the Battle Mountain Trading Post and Pope's Bike Shop were the two most beloved buildings in town, and your building and the maintenance building owned by CenturyLink on Boulder Alley got voted like the ugliest buildings in town. Just, I'm not
I get it.
commenting on personally you, but that's kind of who we are as a community. Even though it's brand new and a nice stucco condo, it lacked character and has since been remodeled slightly and is better. But back to the historicness, I don't think there's a lot to salvage, but just materials, personally. But I would love, and part of our process and one of the options is to repurpose the building materials. And there's a lot of rustic barnwood, which is very sought after. The logs, I believe it's probably just 4 walls if the other 2 walls exist. And that could be something which is up to you, whether you want some part of it. If it was me designing it and building it, I would try to incorporate something of the past into the new, just as a reminder of what was there and a monument to the history and the people and the lives that built this town. And your 10 is desirable, and I even discussed, we're trying to move and relocate a barn and making that barn rustic and period appropriate. Would be great if we could salvage the 10 off that roof, because it's impossible. It's very sought after building material. So all of these I'd love to communicate with you and talk with you later on that. But yeah, there's, to me, in my professional opinion, I've been in the house before because I knew the renters. I haven't been in every single nook and cranny, but just the entrance rooms. And I did take a look around the outside today and a couple of weeks ago, and just to look closer to how salvageable it is. And yeah, it's, it would, in my opinion, most people would want to condemn it, but we still have dozens of people that live like that in this town. And that also, leads to another thing of, it's another house that used to be a worker's house and now will be a vacation house. And I've seen people live in storage trailers because they wanted to be here so bad, and didn't want to move, but couldn't afford a new house, new prices. And that's why people live in, some of the old trailers that we have from the 50s, because they love this community so much. But other people see it as, they shouldn't be allowed to live there. But that's how passionate people are about this town. Just to give you guys a heads up, and obviously you see something in this town too that drew you here. And I always say, what do people take photos of? And it's not shiny, clean new buildings like we're standing in. I haven't seen one tourist take a picture of this town hall, but they have taken photos of your house and other shacks and Gilman. So I just want everyone to think about that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why we're here. And I'm sorry it put you through a lot of distress, but the people that live here and have lived here are so passionate about this place that they just don't like change. And one of the reasons we aren't like the rest of the valley is because we don't do things like the rest of the valley. But that's why we're very sought after also. And hopefully you can appreciate that too. So hopefully you'll appreciate this process after this.
Kelly, thank you. Are there other comments, discussions?
Yeah, I can just follow up. Thank you for being here, not just the owners, but more members of the public. I know I can speak for myself that my decision making isn't just based on my experience or education or the fact that I live here in Minturn. I've been here for about 3 years. I've been in the valley for about 16 roughly. So, but what I do think a lot of is what is the public saying, right? What are you folks bringing to the table? What are we hearing from professionals? And those are how I help map out my decisions of what I would recommend or not. And so certainly hearing from professionals and not really hearing any thing from the public that really is regarding this to be of historic nature. I'm not seeing for myself a lot of reason to accept this nomination. And that's kind of how I will continue to always be with this. I want to hear from the public. So anybody out there or anybody that's listening, the more we have people here, the better we can make the decisions that are right. Because certainly sitting in another situation where the factors aren't as they are in this case, it may not be how I would, make a recommendation. So thank you. Appreciate you taking the time to be here. I know it's super important, and I can be compassionate to any stress that this causes, and it's something that we're trying, as you shared, we've been trying to learn as well. Like so as I shared about my frustration, like these are the things I would love to be more surfaced for potential owners. Anybody that's coming to Minturn to buy is like, a recognition of whether or not something is living or has viability to live in. I think would be really good to know, because I think it helps the public decide both on a historic basis and economic and commercial viability, right? And in this particular situation, I certainly would never want to be in the way of people that are willing to enhance and bring more folks to town. And so as Kelly shared too, we know that prices of properties here have escalated to a place that I know I'll never be able to buy here, right? But I still sit here because I do feel positive of where Minturn wants to take this. And I think we're not going to be able to ever prevent, and I don't know that we should ever prevent people from being able to do what they want with their properties. But I do hope that anytime that there is a community sentiment that desires the preservation, that's going to win out. And I do think when it's right, it will win out. But for me, it doesn't in this case.
Thank you, Ken. Larry?
I just want to thank you for your time. I feel your passion, and I see this, what Chris Jacobson has done for you in putting together quite a long summary of safety concerns and things inspected, repairs, things needing further review. I'm sorry that this is the process that it has come to. We have not had very many, if any, other nominations come to us. So, thank you, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Larry. Yeah, so really appreciate all the input. Michael, I think your summary is sort of where my head's at, and it was resonated a lot with me because I've been at the property, I've walked through it, and I've looked at it. I've seen the two walls, and I think somebody's estimate about 25% is about right. When I look at it, what I see is, it's kind of interesting with the logs in front, but the rest of the renovations aren't particularly compelling from a historic preservation perspective for me. And then coupled with the safety issues and some of the other things, it just the thing that does resonate with me is I wonder if we could, because we're going to recommend approval with conditions, or a denial. And I was wondering if this salvage issue you raised, if we do have a structure that does have historic aspects to it, like you mentioned, the tin, the logs, some of the other things. And I wonder if we could, I don't know if we condition a denial, but as part of a denial, if we could do I'm not suggesting that we made a decision, I'm asking a question of staff, but if there was a denial, could you also, as part of that, make a request of the owner to salvage as much of that as possible or as practical? And I know there are builders in the room, and I know that is that something we should handle outside of this discussion? Or do you think that can be part of it? At least from our committee perspective, I think all of us would agree that we would love to see, if we denied it, we would want to see it salvaged as much as possible. Is that practical?
Well, I was going to say there are two major redeeming values to this coming up. We've gone through the process, and the value of your family coming into our town is very redeemable and fantastic. The other redeeming value might be some of the materials. And I think, Kelly had offered
Right.
that he could speak with him afterwards. I don't know as
Okay,
a
maybe we
body,
do it that way.
I don't know as a
Maybe we
body
handle it
that's
Okay.
something that we
Right.
can do. We might
think
need to
that's
get
right.
counsel on that.
It just resonated with me very much, so I just wanted to speak to it.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
the only other, so just to finish, Kenneth, the only other comments I'd make is just thank you guys, and just know that we can feel what what this process has meant for you, and so we're aware of that, and we are doing everything we can to streamline things and to make this efficient. And we'll learn from this, and we'll incorporate those learnings as we move forward. So, thank you for your part in all this, Kenneth.
Yeah, I was just gonna share, I mean, I think that's a really novel thing to think about, is like, these were things put up in Minturn, right? And if there's any way for them to stay in Minturn in whatever fashion that is, not that it's a guarantee or that it should be anything enforced by any means,
Exactly.
but I think that is something that I think I'm glad you kind of brought to light, is that there's likely is some community interest in keeping some of the barnwood near and things like that. And
So my suggestion is that, I know I raised it as a question, my suggestion is we don't try to do it now because we don't know how to do it, but that we figure out how we might be able to do it in another similar situation if one comes up, so we'll be prepared next time. And I think what we do here is handle, if there is a denial, then we handle the salvage outside of this meeting.
Yeah, and even furthermore, just,
Yeah.
maybe it's something we type to Dr. Fluelling, because I think another question that we have here, maybe
it's a
not
good
something
idea.
that we can answer as well.
And I ran out of time, like I always do, but I know salvage part was part of what we were dealing with. I just forgot exactly where and how that fit into the process. And
That's
like
kind of what I was wondering.
I'm the same way. I'm pushing for the materials are worth more than the building itself in historicness. And I'm always pushing to streamline things. And so,
Okay.
like, in my
Let's-
opinion, if we can not nominate it but then kind of get a promise of salvageability that can either be
My-
reused by yourself or elsewhere in our town is what I would push for.
My suggestion would be that because we're not prepared and we don't have knowledge about how to do that, that we don't try to do it right now. We've already been through a lot with these folks, and they're obviously amenable to this. So my suggestion is we handle it outside. But to Kenneth's point, we ask staff to give us some guidance on this. So if it comes up again, then we'll have a more concrete answer and perhaps make that part of a commission action.
But it was one of our options was salvage. I just forgot exactly where in the process, and Madison knows that one.
Is there something you'd
Unfortunately,
like to add to this, Madison?
I would.
Okay, thank you.
Unfortunately, while I do believe that was talked about when we were adopting Chapter 19, I'm not sure if that might have been a section that was removed. I will certainly have to take a closer look at Chapter 19 to see if there are any options for town or other people to salvage any materials from demolition.
That I thought it was one of the options in Chapter 19.
And I will certainly look at that.
But I'm all for streamlining things, and I know if it gets nominated, and then it's gonna be like a whole much more stress for you guys. And I would love there to be at this stage an option for that,
Yeah.
for salvage.
And if I
Okay,
can,
so I
sorry.
think there were-
For properties like this, and we have a lot of properties that are better than yours, and some that are actually in worse condition than yours.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
we're not going to get into who's
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Let's not.
Concerning conditioning any demolition, especially conditioning, or not, I apologize, considering any conditioning any denial, not demolition. If you are recommending denial based on criteria and findings that are before you tonight, that is perfectly within your purview. However, I do not believe it would be appropriate to condition your denial that the
Okay.
property owner do something for the HPC or the town, or do something with the materials afterwards. If you are going to recommend denial, then it should be a recommendation straight out, rather than trying to navigate
It'd be a condition or option in the future if we.
Let's break it into two things. So let's remove this discussion about salvage from our decision. And let's just make a request. Can we make a request of staff to look at this?
Absolutely.
So that if this comes up again, we have a better answer.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's remove that, and then Kelly will be following up with you. Is there more discussion here, or it sounds?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Would you like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we deny the nomination of the structure 478 Eagle Street, Minturn, Colorado 81645, Mr. Ford's family, on the grounds that the structure does not have enough historical significance, and that the structure is deemed dangerous.
Okay,
Does that work?
that works for me. So is there a second?
I'll second that denial.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, none opposed, motion carries. And then we'd like to again thank you all so much for everything. And just know that all of that you've gone through, you're the first ones. Somebody's got to go first. So, you're the first ones. But what you're doing is you're blazing a trail. You're helping us learn too. And so we really, really appreciate it. So thank you very much. And Kelly will be following you for the next 14 days on salvage issues. Okay, discussion direction items.
We have none.
We have none. Staff reports.
We have none.
none. HPC comments, Historic Preservation Commission comments, anyone?
I just wanted to kind of bring that one piece back up about Mr. Pukas or Michael brought up about, I think this came up a little bit in our training with Dr. Flewelling, but I think certainly raised the question again around, percentage base of what is historic, what's not historic, if we say we are preserving something, is it just the things of that age and everything else can be torn off? And so I think that's a place that brought to light to me that we may further discuss, maybe just a future discussion item, and or maybe in that discussion we could frame a question. I don't really know what my question is particularly, but it just seems like it's a place that has been brought up. So thank you so much for bringing that up, because I think the percentages mean everything, in this. If it's this amount or that amount, and or what the state regards as preservable, I think can help us.
Well, we did discuss way back this situation coming, and I believe we just said that it would just be a topic there's to be discussed, and we would make a decision on it, which is what we did.
Yeah.
So I think we're doing what we discussed we would do in situations that many of our buildings were. Well, any old building has been modified and changed throughout the years. Sometimes in a positive way, sometimes in the cheapest way, and So I think we're doing what we sought out and said we were doing last year. And, we have such a great area to do a percentage is also up to interpretation. And we just decided we had just leave it for discussion,
Yeah, sorry.
which is what we did.
Larry, I know you wanted to make a comment.
I would,
Yeah.
thank you. Because this may be my second to last meeting, I want to discuss, knowing that we're going to be working with council, I believe, July 17th, is that correct? One of the things that,
This is on a separate item, don't worry.
but this family has brought to my attention something that's been near and dear to my heart, and that's the what I believe is people have a right to do with, to a certain degree, what they want with their property. As Kelly said, none of us like to be told what we can and can't do. That being said,
We're very
I feel like
authority.
there is very much some relevance to historic structures that should be kept historic, and I have to say that my property is probably one of those.
Probably the best example, but
And so, my point I want to make is I would like for this body to bring up with the council the concept of, can there be a weighted value of, if a property owner does not want their property historic, can that have a certain weight to it in a decision-making process, even to the point of saying, if the property owner doesn't want it, so be it. If the property owner wants it, then let's cheer them on. But I just would like to see this body have conversation with the council to address that specifically. It breaks my heart to see what you've had to go through to come up with this. Extraordinarily grateful, because you are teachers for us in this process, and it's a part of community, and very much admire your vulnerability and willing to share your passions. So thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, so Larry, I made a note of that, and we are gonna be having some meetings in advance of that, so we'll carry that into that discussion. You'll be there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great.
and really our purpose is try to encourage people to want to save the structures that do. However, in our world of litigation, we have to treat everyone fairly, and so that's why everything has to come before us. We have to set certain parameters, and we can't just say, oh, we like that building right off the start. We have to treat everyone with fairness, or else someone's gonna sue for, oh, you didn't pick on them, and et cetera. So we apologize, but it's just in being fair to everybody in the town, and so we're not picking on any one person.
Thank you, thank you. Just a housekeeping item, I don't know where you were gonna respond. I know we had one question back there about,
Yes, I can
Yes.
totally respond to that.
is this a good one, good place to do it?
S-
Actually, we'd all be interested in the answer. too.
Yeah, absolutely. So if a structure is designated as historic, we specifically put into the historic preservation guidelines, or chapter 19, that we as a town do not really get involved in what goes on in the interior of the house. Obviously, if you need a building permit, that's completely separate. But from a historic preservation standpoint, the interior of the house is not of concern. It is only the exterior that is of concern to the Historic Preservation Commission and to the Register.
But okay, but I think the question was, I see, what, are you saying that it's kind of an all or nothing? In other words, you would designate the whole structure historic?
Hmm.
Okay, so
That's currently
that's the answer to the question, that the whole structure would be deemed historic, and then it would be a planning and zoning process for any alterations. Is that correct?
And HPC.
And
If
HPC.
you would like to, if a structure is designated as historic and somebody would like to affect the outside of that structure, they would have to apply for a certificate of appropriateness. If they were looking to alter the structure, then they would have to abide by the Secretary of Interior's design guidelines. They would like to demolish, then as Mr. Pukas stated earlier, they have to meet
Right.
certain criteria within the code.
So if it's a historic designation, it's the entire structure, but we don't mess with the inside. The outside's covered by HPC and design process.
And if there's two
Does
buildings,
that answer the question? Okay, great.
and if there's two buildings, it would just be the one building and not the entire property, but in this case,
Yeah.
it's
And-
one
yeah.
building.
Okay, it's not so relevant to y'all based on our decision, but I did want to, out of respect, make sure we got an answer for you. Let's see.
One more comment.
Oh, one more comment, yes.
Being members of the community, we are really tight knit, as you've heard. And our council, as well as this HPC, are very much open to hearing from you of what your experience was like to help us get better. Our town council and this commission is about to meet next month to discuss this very concern. So your input would be highly valued.
That's on July 17th.
We'd be happy
Yeah.
to contribute.
Thank
however
you.
we can.
Yeah, it'd be great. Okay, any other comments, commission comments? Future agenda items, we just mentioned it already, that we have the joint meeting with council on the 17th, so we'll be having some internal discussions before that to make that as constructive as possible, and look forward to hopefully seeing everybody there. Don't believe we have anything else on a future agendas. So we come to adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn? So moved. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
All right, we are adjourned.